Okay, I think I covered this pretty good just in my introduction. Results letters. When the result letters were generated, there was some programming in place that says if this guy is successful for a sheep tag, tell him congratulate him and tell him about his mandatory indoctrination. It was never discussed at any point. No one thought about it, removing that language because of the change in the rules. As a result, 343 clients got this email reminding them about that indoctrination. It was a programming oversight. QA missed it in their tests. Programming's been corrected for next year, so it won't happen again next year. We reissued a number of tags that we should not have, and it happened over, it's multiple problems that occurred. We had a lady whose tags were, credit card wasn't clearing, and so were her sons, and we continually tried to contact them, and we weren't having any success in contacting them. And finally, the husband called, and he was successful in the draw as well. And his credit card had cleared already. It was a family. And he called and he says, I understand you called about my tags. There's a problem. And the operator looked up the tags, his tags, and said, your credit card's good. Don't worry, disregard it. Don't worry about it. We went back, we continued to try to contact the lady and the son for still no success. We got to the end of it, we said, done, reissue the tags. He did, in his conversation, mention that his son and wife had drawn tags, but there was no clear connection. But the operator should have looked at the son's tags and the wife's tags, did not, and we reissued the tags. And 3 of these problems, items 2, 3, and 5, are all a result of that one conversation. We had another client called and said, I understand you're calling me about my tag, that there's a problem. And the operator, for whatever reason, looked him up in the Utah database rather than the Nevada database. He applies in Utah as well. He was successful in Utah this year. The operator looked him up in Utah and said, your credit card's good. The operator should have looked him up in the Nevada database. He called on the Nevada line. I can't tell you what possessed the operator to do that, but he did. And we sent the guy away thinking that his tags were good, and they weren't. His credit card was declined, and we reissued his tags. There was another case where the operator called to try to reach a client, and this is on the 1107, or no, I'm sorry, the 4181 tag. And there was a really unusual message. I listened to the recording. There was an automated message about mailbox not being available, but it was something a little more bizarre than that. And anyway, the operator made the appropriate notes. The supervisor reviewed it and read it as not a good, valid phone number. And we didn't have any other way of contacting him. And as a result, she reissued his tag. All of these are clerical, procedural, detail-oriented mistakes, every one of these. And all I can say is that there will be more training to try to prevent this. Training from my operators, training from my supervisor. I'm more ashamed of these mistakes than any of the others on the list, to be honest with you. These just shouldn't, none of these should have happened, and they all did. My supervisor We had a client that recently moved to Nevada. He showed up on the list for reallocation, and she saw his Nevada address and assumed that he was a resident, and he was not. He was a non-resident, and as a result, we reallocated a resident tag to a non-resident. That tag was retrieved. It was taken. She had to call him back and take it away from him. He was credited, and then the tag was moved on to an appropriate resident client. There was a problem because we haven't had a lot of combined quota on the first come first served site for several years. And there was a problem if there was combined quota, the program was not looking at the quota correctly when we started selling tags on a first come first served basis. And we sold one too many tags on that website. It was caught just about as soon as it had happened. Programming was corrected. We looked at each of the tags that was sold for that hunt. We contacted the last client, gave them the bad news, credited their account, and so we actually didn't overissue the tag, but we did allow it to happen. Well, those are the worst of my mistakes that I'm aware of this year. A few things that we've done to try to improve ourselves this past year. We've upgraded our phone system to a ShoreTel TCP IP phone system, which gives us a lot of flexibility in the number of lines that we can answer for any given state at a given time. The phone recording system is fully integrated into it. It wasn't before. It gives us more reliability. We actually have a backup telephone server now, so we have more redundancy there if our phone system should go down. Backup phone system, backup lines. It's going to allow us to do some programming to integrate some of the phones into the websites for the operators and streamline our process a little bit. We also just recently moved the Nevada websites, not NWDS, but the application hunt system websites, to a server farm. Rather than the websites running on a single server, they're running on multiple servers. So if one of the servers goes down, you lose some performance, but you don't lose the website. And there are redundant servers to carry the load should a server fail. And I think that's about all I got. Thank you.
Any questions?
Any other questions for me or Don?
Commissioner Rain?
Yeah, one back on Dream Tags. It looks to me like you had about, for every person that bought a stamp, resource enhancement stamp, you had about, they bought about 9 or so chances total?
It's actually a little higher than that. It's what's not apparent on that set of statistics is about, curiously enough, about 2,000, I think, people who bought resource enhancement stamps did not buy a Dream Tag ticket. You're looking at one. I bought the stamp and didn't want to take any chance that I would win the tag, and so I didn't buy the Dream Tag ticket. But there were, I think even Bill Bradley, who's the chairman of the Dream Tag committee, also bought a stamp and also did not buy any tickets. But we were surprised at the number of people who did that, who bought the stamp and did not buy the ticket.
And is there any, what further statistics you had in that? You said so it ended up being 11 or 12?
Yeah, I think if you took instead of 8,000 and you made it 6,000, we can get you the exact number, but
okay,
it's basically, it's going to run that up to like 12 or so, yeah.
Yeah, it's 12 point something. And was that spread out? It's just interesting. It seemed the way they went here was mostly relatively even across the species. Antelope being lower like all the other specialty tags. Was there some of them that bought like lots of tags and
Yeah.
some bought one and?
Yeah, we had, actually, if you look at the winners, they're kind of interesting. We had a couple of people who bought 500 tickets each right across the board, like bought a total of, I don't know, whatever that is, 2,500 tickets or something. We had a guy who won with one ticket. His son thought it would be a nice Father's Day gift, bought him a ticket, and he won with it, which is terrific, and they publicized that on the website. We had a number of the winners had 10 or 20 tickets, but we had people up who bought hundreds of tickets. I don't think any of the people who bought hundreds of tickets won. Yeah, it was all in the
Publicize
smaller
that on the
numbers.
website, huh?
I mean, there's only 5 numbers, it's random, and only 5 species, and it's random. What's that?
3 non-residents.
Yeah, three of the winners were non-residents, by the way. All of that information, this is kind of still feeling our way, but the way the legislation's written, this is sort of, there's kind of a couple of Chinese walls in this, and this is administered by the Community Foundation of Western Nevada, and we wrote the draw software. We were the vendor picked to do it, and Endow issues the tag, or provides the tag for issuance, and so we're sort of all trying to decide who's supposed to do what still. But most of the information about the winners is not really apparent as much on the Endow site as it is on this Nevada Dream Tag site. If you go to nvdreamtag.org, you can see the stories of the winners, and they read pretty interesting. So.
My follow-up would basically this report would be, as I know you guys mentioned several times about Utah and other draws. In your experience, can you give me the top 1 or 2 things that Nevada doesn't do, the other states do, that seem like a really good idea? Or have we covered all that?
Well, one we're going to cover today, Utah's web only, and that seems like that's working pretty well. They've been doing it for a couple of years now, and so I would say that's a good idea. In all honesty, it's more the opposite. We take stories to other states about what Nevada does that we think is better. A perfect example is that in Nevada, it's in regulation, if not in statute, that if there is an error by the department, somebody gets mishandled in the application process, that the tag will be oversubscribed for that unit. And there's a process. It's been in place before we got the contract. It worked that way. In Utah, they consider it a biologically sensitive issue, and so they first make a determination if you were wronged or not, same as we would in Nevada, and then they secondly decide whether that unit for that hunt would support additional quota. So some people walk away with a bonus point because they were unsuccessful, and some people, though they would have been successful in Nevada, and some people get a tag because the feeling of the biologist for that species, for that unit is, yeah, that unit can support it. For us, it makes it very difficult because somebody calls in, if we find there's a problem, we say, yeah, we acknowledge there's a problem. They say, well, am I going to get a tag then? We don't know. So we've a number of times tried to point out to Utah. Also, I think the draw process in Nevada is much simpler in being able to explain to someone, that you could talk to someone and explain how it works. And Utah's is exceedingly, in my estimation, complex, that it's kind of like when Einstein did the move from the special theory of relativity to the general theory of relativity. He said 2 people in the world understand it, author included. And that's kind of what's happened, I think, with some aspects of the Utah draw, because they have set-asides, and if you look at their turkey draw, it's with the youth and with the bonus point rounds and everything else, it's exceedingly complex, and it's gotten to the point where it's hard to train an operator to explain it, and it's very hard to explain it to their constituency. And so I think we have more to provide to other states in the way of learning about the draw than they have to provide to us, but web only is certainly a good example.
Web only, and so that's it. Don't have any.
Monty, can you think of anything in Utah you'd like to see?
Doesn't have to be this
carried
meeting,
here?
it could be next meeting or next meeting, but if you think of something, you guys know about this stuff, see it more than anybody else probably, so.
I wanted to support one of your statements, like, we have you guys come out and watch the Nevada Big Game Draw. if you want to come watch the Utah big game draw, bring your sleeping bag. You'll be there overnight. It takes that long to run the Utah draw because of the complexity of the draw.
Mr. Chairman, just an informational question from my own education. Is there any states in the West that have an, in other words, if you draw a tag, you're precluded from getting the tag the following year? In other words, a rotation? And have you looked at that model at all? And would that balance, and if so, would it, I realize that we're all trying to do this fairly, but will it give more people an opportunity to hunt without going 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, irregardless of where they put in for their tag, a chance to hunt?
Well, Utah has waiting periods that are different than Nevada's for various species.
I'm talking specifically about antlered mule deer.
Oh, for mule deer.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Monty, is there a waiting period on the mule deer in Utah, or is that just 1 year?
It's just 1 year.
Okay. Alaska has a weird wrinkle that if you draw, and they have designated premium units.
Right.
You know, like the Sheldon or
I've
something
hunted
like
up
that.
there, yeah.
And if you draw in that unit, you can draw the next year in a okay unit,
Right,
if you will,
right.
but you can't draw in one of the premium
Premium
units.
units,
That's the
yeah.
closest that I can think to it. I don't know, Ken maybe could speak to it. Can you think of another state? California doesn't, right?
No, they really regulate that vis-a-vis the bonus point, preference point system, and they encourage people to apply. The application fee is an important part of revenue source
Right.
and all that stuff. So,
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Ken.
Wrinkle on that would cause the same kind of shifting is a preferential system, and Utah does use that in their in their general season deer. And what that means is that you don't lose them purchasing a license, you don't lose them applying, but there may be no way that they can get a tag with one preference point, because all people with a single preference point get considered before anybody with no preference points, and all the people with 2 preference points get considered before anybody with 1. And that effectively does what you're talking about without having the negative consequence, I think, that Ken's bringing up of losing those hunters, and possibly they don't buy a hunting license, and that affects the Pittman-Robertson, and there's a whole bunch of other consequences to it.
Thank you.
If you keep asking questions like that, Commissioner Young, you're raising your hand to get on the TAC committee.
No. Just trying to figure out why my son, I was trying to figure out why my son and I applied for the same exact areas. He had 1 point, I had 4, he drew, I didn't. I'm just trying to figure out the math here, that's all.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, that concludes that agenda item.